Thank you for watching How Atlassian Does DevOps. Check out the questions and answers from customers that we covered during the webinar.
So the first question we got was regarding the webinar and whether it's going to be available for download. So yes, the webinar, the recording and the slides will be available for download. And thanks for letting us know that you found the content very useful, and you're gonna share that with your team. So that's really exciting. I mean, that's what we're doing this for. If you got more questions, there's other things that you want us to cover, please let us know as well. Great questions, and thanks, and keep them coming. Next question. Okay, up. So with all of those voices, both from the customers and co-workers in the feedback process, how do you decide which objectives to work on? So, Tanguy, do you want to take this question?
Yep. Which one? Yes. Okay. Yeah. I see this one. So, basically, I mean, I'd love to answer that it's like science, exact science, but in fact, it's it's really more of an art, right? As you can imagine. So the first thing is when I joined Atlassian and the way we worked in the HipChat team, I've realized very early on that there's a different model to all the places I used to work in before, where instead of working with a digested or limited amount of information every once in a while, what we do here is we basically work with a fire hose of information in streaming. So we are, the team is plugged into Twitter, plugged into our monitoring tools, plugged into Jira, plugged into updates that happen in Confluence, and so on and so forth. And we use the digesting information in streaming as opposed to just doing that regularly. At the same time, we need perspective. And so for that, we've got specialized teams that gather feedback and roll it up for us to help us see the tree from the forest. So two examples I can give you there is our support team creates a monthly report which they give us that tells us which problems impact our customers the most. And the second one is we have a team that runs surveys with users that are run in product. And we call them NPS surveys. So NPS stands for Net Promoter Score. Our customers can basically give us a rank, so between 0 and 10, to tell us how likely they would be to recommend our tools to their workmates or friends, and give a bit of an explanation behind that. And what we have is a team that goes through that and provides us with reports monthly to explain what's impacting our users the most. So what we do is we review this in the backlog pretty much weekly. We look at what came up. We review big initiatives monthly with the whole team, and we commit on new ones every 6 months, and we take all of that into account. So it's a mix of really art and science.
Cool. Thanks a lot for that, Tanguy. Next question is regarding Bamboo. So let me just push that to everyone on the webinar. So how do you scale your Bamboo agents to support constant builds for multiple teams, create agents on the fly, and also questions about how many Bamboo agent servers you have? So I think probably a question for Mike.
Yep. Yeah. So that's pretty much exactly what we do. So Bamboo has this functionality called Elastic Agents. And those agents, as opposed to hooking up your own servers to Bamboo to act as agents, where obviously you'd run into limitations there, Bamboo can actually take AMIs, image configurations, and spin up as many Elastic agents as you need. So Bamboo, I think recently actually increased the maximum limit of Elastic agents you can have up from 100 to 250. So yeah, basically we have a couple of dozen Bamboo servers, each with the ability to spin up hundreds of agents each. And Bamboo also has its own Elastic instance management that you can configure, so you can adjust how eager it is to spin up new agents and how quickly it shuts them down to kind of keep your costs under control there. So thanks for that question.
Cool. Next question's for HipChat. So I'm putting that on the screen. So can you elaborate on how you direct alerts to HipChat without it becoming noise? Do you split by source or topic or anything else? Nick, do you want to take this one?
Sure, absolutely. And I think this is a fantastic question because it really gets to the heart of kind of the way in which if you have a noisy source of information, it quickly degrades in value in people's minds. So you need to get on top of that quite quickly. So up front, you want to make sure that you spend some time developing an approach, but you need to keep in mind that it's not going to be a one-off exercise. You're going to put something in place, and then obviously over time it's going to evolve as people create new alerts or as the systems themselves change, thresholds are adjusted, etc. The key thing to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that it's actionable alerts that go into the main channel, and that for the most part, things that can be ignored should probably go somewhere else. So one of the things that we've done is to actually separate the alerts into separate HipChat rooms based on some criteria that we've been able to define. In some cases, that's really easy. If we've got separate monitoring systems that deal with separate systems, separate infrastructure, that's very easy to separate those because we can just direct the alerts to different channels. But in some other cases, we've actually ended up having to write some rules. So for instance, a script that we have that can differentiate on certain criteria that we can also use to separate. For instance, on the severity level of an alert, that could go into the main room versus a low severity alert could go just to the disturbed person who's on a rotation within a team. Now, the last thing I'd point out is that in order to enable HipChat to take part as a component of a broader sort of ChatOps ecosystem, as I pointed out in my section of the webinar, we've invested in the Connect framework, which allows HipChat to integrate with third parties, such as BigPanda, which can allow you to also use some of their functionality to differentiate alerts into different groupings, as well as things like Notify for Twitter, or even for Bitbucket, you can have a list of PRs that can be published into a HipChat room via Connect.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Nick. Lots of great questions, so thanks a lot, everyone. Please keep them coming. The next one is really like a generic question, I guess. What are the most common pitfalls when trying to implement DevOps within your organization? Tanguy, do you want to take a stab at this one first?
Yep. I mean, there's let me think about it. There's probably a few ways to look at it. The first one is, I think there's often a misunderstanding of what DevOps actually is, and the signal to look for there is do you talk about having a DevOps team? Do you have DevOps as a function? So do you try to hire people saying, hey, we want DevOps developers, or we want DevOps people? In which case, typically, I think you're probably looking at it the wrong way. DevOps is not a function. It's a set of principles that the whole team needs to embrace. It's a bit like Agile. You know, you don't have like a project manager and then a bunch of people doing work. Agile is a process that uses the whole team, and it's the same thing with DevOps. So think about it as in it's cross-disciplinary. So the people writing code also know how to scale the infrastructure. They also are involved in the planning and so on and so forth, more than having a developer who can also write scripts to deploy. It's an end-to-end thing, right? So the first pitfall is misunderstanding what DevOps is. It's not developers that just push stuff to production and write scripts to do it. It's a whole culture thing. So it's not about the tools. It's about accountability and ownership. The team needs to be able to operate end-to-end and be and own really the product of their work. The second pitfall is probably trying to apply every principle blindly without thinking of your team's context and where you're at today. So our best advice there would be to go about it very incrementally and see if it's helping you or not, and then reassess based on that. Not every principle is going to apply to your context, so it's good to keep an open mind. And the third is probably to for expanding to the rest of the organization, and a bit of lack of consistency there. So it's I mean, depending on the size of your company, you could be a small company and that's it. It all works by just trying it with a team of 5 or 10 if that's your size. For bigger companies, there are processes that help with things like competency centers, having champions for this, managing change management, realigning really the way the organization works to support these principles and this tooling. And it's very important to skill up the people and giving them a taste really of what it's like. Often when I say, listen, if you want to know how DevOps works, just come and join us for a week and we just work together on that. But that's a bit like that, right? It's coming from the finance world, sitting with Joe. So you sit on someone's desk, you see how they work, and you learn from it. And that's the type of thing that helps discover what it's really about, and then expand it to other teams. So yeah, I hope that answers some part of the question at least.
Thank you so much, Tony. Next question is a little bit is regarding Chaos Monkey. So we mentioned Netflix, and someone was asking whether Atlassian is running tools like Chaos Monkey to test his environment, or Spinnaker to manage in AWS. Mike, do you want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah. So we are actually using Chaos Monkey in our team. For people that don't know, Chaos Monkey is an open source tool originally written by Netflix, and its job is to kind of act as a malicious agent and go through your infrastructure and randomly shut down or destroy things. The point being that your infrastructure and your system should be set up in such a way that when your systems do fall over in various unexpected ways, you can recover quickly or actually automatically. So Netflix is obviously very large, and they're pretty good at doing that. You'd probably want to be quite a mature team to be able to pull off using Chaos Monkey everywhere and in production. Our team is not quite there yet. We're only using it in our staging environment. So we're able to configure Chaos Monkey to just kill things in our staging environment, and even within there, only certain stateless services that we have automatic recovery set up for. But our goal is to eventually expand this out to the rest of our staging environment, and hopefully later on our production environment. It's kind of based on the theory of, if something hurts, then keep doing it, and you then have that motivation to come up with ways of recovering quickly and even automatically from that. As far as Spinnaker, we don't use Spinnaker, but we sort of have rolled our own sort of functionality. Spinnaker is quite opinionated in the way that it has things set up. But yeah, we pretty much roll our own stuff through Terraform, customized to our needs. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Mike. We got a couple more questions coming. I'm just being mindful of time. So the next one is talking about infrastructure as code. So asking about if we can talk a bit more about infrastructure as code and how coupled are them to the software the infrastructure is hosting. So Mike, do you want to, probably a question for you?
Yeah, so I think I guess we covered it to a certain extent, but just to elaborate on it a bit more, there is a relatively high degree of coupling between like the Puppet code that we write and the services that we're running. We try to mitigate that somewhat by using Puppet modules that are provided by the community. So these are open source Puppet modules, maybe for installing fairly popular pieces of software, and so we can sort of leverage the community to maintain and keep those up to date for us. But definitely we write a lot of Puppet modules specifically to tailor software to be specifically configured for our needs. So there's quite a high degree of coupling there. So yeah, I think think that's it.
Cool, thank you. Another question probably for you here about the time it takes to complete the pipeline in the slide, and they're asking, which step is taking most of the time there.
Yeah, so this is probably our team's biggest bugbear at the moment. Our full pipeline can take roughly 3 hours to run, which is enormous, and it does cause big problems. So what we're actually doing here is we're actually spinning up, basically we're spinning up sort of a staging environment with all of our infrastructure in it, and we run tests against everything. So since we maintain quite a bit of infrastructure, we're basically spinning up dozens of EC2 instances, running Puppet on them, which installs everything from scratch, and then running tests across that, and then burning AMIs. So there's no one step that takes the bulk of that time, but the main phases is the Puppet apply. So that sort of has to go through all the bits of software that we have on the servers, download them from wherever we get them from, and install them and configure them. So that's the first phase. That takes a pretty big chunk of time. Then we run our test suite once it's all installed with Cucumber. Depending on the service, that can take quite a lot of time as well, because some of those tests may involve service restarts and things like that. And finally, the third phase, the AMI burn, that can take something like half an hour to an hour, depending on how large the service is, how much data needs to be burned. So that's the main reason why it's taking so long. We always try and come up with ways to trim that down, because having a pipeline that takes a really long time is actually quite a detriment in a DevOps environment. You really want quick feedback. You want to be able to fail fast to I guess, improve productivity there. So yeah, it's definitely a problem, and definitely if you have a pipeline that takes 3 hours, it's definitely worthwhile investing in trying to cut it down.
Awesome. Thank you. There's another question regarding there's the copy of the presentation. So we've answered that earlier on. So yes, we'll share that on our blogs, and also if you've registered to the webinar, we'll send you a follow-up email with a link to it. But the second part of the question is about the list of tools being used and the various stage of integration, deployment to server. So there's a link in the interface on 24. You'll see that there's the loop on the right side with a link with a green button. If you click there, it's going to take you to the page where all the tools that we've mentioned today in the webinar are being listed, and then there's more information for you to find there. Probably have time for one last question. That's about continuous delivery and quality checks. Okay, talking about quality checks, quite a bit hard to read. Okay, so I think it's
single lane for each commit. Okay, I'm going to use that one too.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have teams. Different teams do things differently regarding this. So I know we have some teams where we have single commits that do go through the whole process, but then they kind of once those single commits go to like a staging environment, they then pool up and batch, and then that batch will be sort of tested together and then moved on to the next environment.
Yeah, so in HipChat...
so you changed your mind?
Yeah, I changed my mind because I understood the question. So in HipChat, the way... There's different subsystems within HipChat, but in the one that we built for HipChat Connect, basically we wrote up a bunch of commits into a pull request. That's what gets reviewed by the team. And then the unit of deployment and testing is the pull request itself. So it could be anywhere from, say, 3 lines of code to bigger ones, but typically it's a small change. And the small change has got testing, like automated tests run on the feature branch, and then that's what gets deployed into first staging and then into production. So what we tend to do then is the manual testing tends to be fairly small because it's isolated to the change that we just made, so we don't have to retest the whole thing. And then it makes those incremental changes going into production less risky. But yeah, we tend to have those tests being run, like all tests being run on that single feature branch, which is with the atomic change being a pull request there.
It's very worth mentioning, we don't always have complete coverage, as it's pretty much impossible to have that. So a lot of the time when we deal with things sort of in post-mortem, having had an incident, a relatively common outcome can be, okay, we need to implement a new category of test, which might address something that has never really been as fully sort of tested in the real world as something that's perhaps gone into production. So we learn a lot from the way in which things fail when they encounter production load, and then use that to inform the way that we write tests for pre-production.
Yeah, that's the type of things where often we need to get better, which is to actually have real production load going to staging environments before features go out, so you can replicate really what's going on in production in testing. So we've got a number of initiatives we've got some systems that do it, some systems that don't do it, but that's generally good advice if you have a large-scale system.
Cool, excellent. Good, everybody participated on this one. Excellent, great teamwork. It's going to be the last questions. So just being mindful of time, I want to thank everyone again for attending today's webinar. Thanks, Tanguy. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Nick. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for watching. If you want to get the Atlassian tools to practice DevOps, click the Go button on the left. To check out how to run IT support the DevOps way, click the video on the right of your screen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.